When my own son barred me from my grandson's birthday party, feeling the pitying glances of the guests who had already arrived, I knew my life had just been cleaved in two, before and after that moment of utter humiliation. There, standing on the threshold of the banquet hall I had paid for in full, the carefully wrapped gift trembling in my hands, I understood that 40 years of maternal sacrifices had been reduced to a public embarrassment I would never forget. "Mom, Camilla thought it best you didn't come today. It's complicated," Richard whispered, unable to meet my eyes, while his wife watched from the head table with that fake smile I knew so well. The sound of children's music in the background cruelly contrasted with the icy silence that formed between us. I felt my chest constrict, as if someone had tightened a knot around my lungs. 42 years of that man's life before me, 42 years of sleepless nights when he had a fever, of saving up to buy his designer sneakers, of pride etched on my face with each of his achievements. And now he treated me like an unwanted stranger at his own grandson's party. The worst wasn't even the rejection itself, but the way it happened. Peter, my 5-year-old grandson, ran to the door when he saw me, his little eyes shining with pure joy. "Grandma Helen, you came!" he shouted, clinging to my legs with that tight hug that always melted my heart. But before I could respond, Camilla approached with firm steps, her high heels echoing on the banquet hall floor like a judge's gavel. "Peter, go back to the table. Grandma isn't staying today," she said, pulling the boy by the arm with a firmness that made me shudder. I saw the confusion settling on his little face, that expression of someone who doesn't understand why adults do such strange and cruel things. It was at that moment, watching my grandson being dragged away from me as he reached out his little arms towards me, that something inside me broke irreparably. It wasn't just my heart shattering, but also my pride, my dignity, the entire image I had of myself as the respected matriarch of that family. In 65 years of life, I had never been treated with such disdain, especially by people who owed everything to me. I returned home in a state I don't know how to describe. My hands trembled so much I could barely get the key in the lock. I sat in the living room armchair, still wearing the navy blue dress I had chosen especially for the occasion, and let the tears fall freely for the first time in months. I cried for myself, I cried for my grandson, I cried for my son, who had become a stranger, and I cried for my late husband Anthony, who would turn in his grave if he knew how our family had disintegrated. The story that brought me to that moment of humiliation began long before, decades ago, when I was still a 23-year-old newlywed full of dreams. Anthony and I met at the textile factory where we both worked, he in the machinery department, I in sewing. Times were tough, but we were happy in our simplicity. When Richard was born, I quit my job to dedicate myself entirely to him. Anthony took on extra shifts to compensate for the income I stopped bringing in, and that's how we built our lives, him working double shifts, me taking care of the house and our boy with all the love in the world. Richard was a sweet, intelligent child, but always very emotionally dependent. When he had nightmares, he'd run to our bed. When he got hurt playing, he'd only stop crying in my lap. When he started school, I walked with him every day, even when he was too old for it, because he'd ask me with those pleading eyes I could never refuse. Perhaps it was this overprotection that created an insecure personality in him, always seeking external approval, always trying to please everyone at the same time. During adolescence, Richard became even more attached to my opinion. He chose the clothes I approved of, the friends I deemed suitable. Even his college major was decided after long conversations with me. Anthony sometimes complained that I was raising a mama's boy, but I only saw a sensitive boy who needed guidance. When he graduated with a degree in business administration, it was the proudest day of my life. We were the first family on our street to have a child with a college degree. Richard's marriage to Camilla happened when he was 28. From the first meeting, I sensed she was different from the other girlfriends he had brought home. Camilla was beautiful, elegant, well-dressed, but there was something in her eyes that bothered me, a kind of calculated coldness that made me feel like I was constantly being evaluated and judged. She came from an upper-middle-class family, had a higher education, worked for a multinational company, and made it clear, even without words, that she considered our family inferior to her social standards. During their engagement, I tried to get close to her in every way possible. I invited her to lunch on Sundays, offered to help with the wedding preparations, even suggested she call me Mom, as is tradition. But Camilla always kept a respectful yet cold distance. She answered my questions with polite monosyllables, accepted my food without enthusiasm, and never reciprocated invitations. When I tried to give advice on relationships or domestic life, she would smile condescendingly and change the subject. The wedding ceremony perfectly reflected their dynamic. Her family occupied most of the church, well-dressed people loudly discussing international trips and investments. On our side, there were half a dozen relatives, a few dear neighbors, and Richard's childhood friends. During the reception, I felt completely out of place, like an extra in a movie about otherworldly people. Camilla greeted each of my guests with polite formality, but it was clear she wasn't genuinely interested in getting to know them. After the wedding, the distance between me and Richard began to gradually widen. Our daily phone calls became weekly, then bi-weekly. When I called, it was often Camilla who answered, always with an excuse for Richard's unavailability. He was showering, he'd stepped out, he was working. My visits, once spontaneous and frequent, needed to be scheduled in advance. "Can you come Saturday afternoon, Mom? Camilla has appointments in the morning," Richard would say, as if I were a business appointment. The situation worsened drastically when Peter was born. I was at the hospital the day he was born, anxious and thrilled to meet my first grandson. But when I arrived at the maternity ward, I found Camilla's parents already there, holding the baby, taking pictures, organizing everything as if they were the only grandparents that mattered. Camilla was lying in bed, smiling at them, while I stood there, waiting for my turn to meet my grandson. When I finally got to hold Peter, Camilla said, "Be careful with his head, he's very fragile," as if I'd never held a baby before. If you're following along with stories like this and relating to these experiences of family conflict, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories I'll be sharing. Unfortunately, situations like mine are more common than we think. During Peter's first few years, I developed a special relationship with him that saved me from the growing feeling of exclusion. Camilla worked full-time, and Richard also had a demanding schedule, so I offered to care for the boy a few afternoons a week. Peter quickly became accustomed to me, and I rediscovered the joy of being needed, of being loved unconditionally. I prepared his favorite meals, invented games, and told stories I made up myself. He called me Grandma Helen with that sweet, slurred pronunciation of a small child, and my heart melted every time. But even this special relationship with Peter was a source of tension. Camilla subtly criticized everything I did. "Helen, you're giving him too much candy. Helen, he needs to learn to eat by himself. Helen, you don't need to buy so many toys." Each criticism was a jab at my self-esteem, but I swallowed my pride because I loved my grandson more than anything in the world. The breaking point in this tense relationship happened 3 months before the party. Anthony had died of a sudden, devastating heart attack. I was completely lost, sinking into a deep depression, desperately needing the support of my family. But Camilla suggested that maybe I should seek professional help instead of unloading my emotions on Peter. Richard, who should have defended me, agreed with her. "Mom, you need to take care of yourself first," he said, as if my grief were an inconvenient burden for them. It was during this period of mourning and loneliness that I decided to make the most generous gesture of my life. I paid for Peter's fifth birthday party in full. It wasn't a small amount of money. I used practically all the life insurance settlement I received from Anthony's death. I wanted my grandson to have an unforgettable party, and I also hoped, naively, that this gesture would show the family how much I loved them and was willing to sacrifice for them. When I offered to pay for the party, Richard was moved. "Mom, that's very generous, but you don't have to," he said, with tears in his eyes. But I insisted. "I want to do this for my grandson. It's his first party that I can fully sponsor." Camilla accepted my offer, but coldly, as if she were doing me a favor by accepting my money. She completely took over the preparations. She chose the banquet hall, the theme, the decorations, the menu, the guests. I was only consulted to sign the checks. During the weeks leading up to the party, I felt increasingly excluded from the preparations. Camilla organized everything with the precision of an executive, but she never asked my opinion about anything. When I tried to suggest something, a different cake flavor, some extra decorations, some guests from our family, she always had a technical excuse to refuse. The banquet hall doesn't offer that flavor. The decorations have to follow a standard. The guest list is already closed. I felt like a silent sponsor, useful only for paying the bills. The revelation that changed everything happened the day before the party when I called Richard to confirm the times. "Mom, I need to talk to you about tomorrow," he said, with a strange, hesitant voice. "Camilla is very stressed about the arrangements, and she thinks it would be better if you didn't attend the party. You can pick up Peter afterward, and he can tell you all about it." I was silent for a few seconds, trying to process what I had heard. "What do you mean, Richard? I paid for this entire party. How can I not attend?" I asked, feeling my voice tremble. "I know, Mom, and I'm very grateful, but you know how nervous Camilla gets with social events, and she's afraid that the two of you will end up arguing in front of the guests." This conversation kept me awake all night. I replayed in my mind all the times I swallowed insults, all the times I was treated like a second-class citizen in that family, all the opportunities when I chose silence to keep the peace. And now, after paying for an outrageously expensive party, I was being excluded from my own grandson's celebration. It was a humiliation that exceeded all bounds of human decency. The morning of the party, I decided I wouldn't accept the situation passively. I put on the prettiest dress I owned, bought a special gift for Peter, and went to the banquet hall. Not to cause a scene, but to claim my rightful place in that celebration. After all, I was the paternal grandmother. I had paid for everything, and I loved that child more than anyone else at that party. But what awaited me at the door of the banquet hall surpassed my worst expectations. The way I was treated, the public embarrassment, Richard's coldness, Camilla's cruelty, and especially the confusion on Peter's little face made me understand that I had reached the bottom of my personal dignity. During the hours that followed that humiliation, alone in my apartment, I went through an internal transformation process that I never imagined possible. The pain was so intense it felt physical. My chest ached, my head throbbed, my hands trembled. But along with the pain, something I hadn't felt in a long time began to grow inside me. Anger. A clean, justified, powerful anger. Anger at having been treated like a doormat for so long. Anger at having allowed them to trample on my dignity repeatedly. Anger at having been so naive as to believe that financial generosity would buy respect and love. That's when I had an idea that would change everything. If they didn't want my presence at the official party, I would throw my own party for Peter. A real party with people who truly loved and respected me. A party where I would be the star, not the disposable sponsor. I started planning immediately. I called Mrs. Conception, my 70-year-old neighbor who always showed genuine affection for me. I called Marlene, my old coworker who had kept in touch with me for decades.
I called Mr. John, the building superintendent, who always greeted me with a sincere smile. I called Janaina, the bakery saleswoman who had known Peter since he was a baby and always asked how he was doing. In a few hours, I had gathered a group of 10 people who agreed to attend my surprise party. The preparation was intense and exciting. I transformed my living room into a real children's amusement park. I bought colorful balloons and decorated them myself with gold markers. I ordered a custom cake from an artisanal bakery, a much prettier and tastier cake than the one at the expensive banquet hall. I made homemade candies, sandwiches cut into fun shapes, and natural juices.
I discovered that I had spent years trying to buy love and respect through generous gestures and submissive silence. I learned that dignity isn't something you negotiate or beg for. It's something you earn through firmness and self-respect. I understood that being a grandmother didn't mean accepting any treatment, but being a strong and positive presence in my grandson's life. The most important lesson I learned from all this was that true love doesn't need permission to manifest itself. When I was prevented from attending the official party, I didn't lose the opportunity to celebrate Peter. I created an even better opportunity. When I was disrespected by the family, I didn't diminish myself. I strengthened myself. When they tried to exclude me, I didn't disappear. I shone even brighter. Today, when I look back, I'm proud of the woman I became through that ordeal. A woman who learned to set limits without losing her kindness, who discovered her strength without giving up her femininity, who earned respect without sacrificing her ability to love. A woman who understood that being a grandmother is a privilege, but also a position that deserves dignity and recognition. Life taught me that the most difficult moments can become the most transformative experiences. The humiliation I suffered at the door of that party led me to discover an inner power I didn't even know I possessed. Exclusion taught me to create inclusion. Rejection showed me how to build genuine acceptance. And the question I leave for reflection, not only for other grandmothers who may be going through similar situations, but for everyone facing family disrespect, is this: how long will we allow our dignity to be trampled on in the name of family harmony? How long will we be complicit with unfair treatment for fear of confrontation? True family peace doesn't come from the submission of some to the whims of others, but from mutual respect and the recognition of each person's worth. I've learned that love isn't about the place we occupy in the family dynamic, but about how we make others feel truly loved and valued. And most importantly, I've learned that it's never too late to reinvent yourself, to reposition yourself, to demand the treatment you deserve. Age isn't a condemnation to insignificance. It can be the beginning of our most powerful and authentic phase.